everyone. Thank you for joining our session today. My name is Christine Rogers, and I'm going to be facilitating this workshop. This session is going to focus on a case study of Lake Champlain and how we're able to utilize green infrastructure and education to really support the lake and the local economy within that area. So this will be a really good representation of the work that's occurring within Vermont and how it's applicable to our work in New Jersey. So I'm joined today by Linda Patterson, who is the Land Use Planning and Water Quality Educator for the Lake Champlain Sea Grant. And she's responsible for coordinating education programs that educate about the impact of land use on water quality. So we're going to have a great discussion today. As you know from the previous session, you do not have the video capabilities as participants in this session, but you do have the ability to post your questions into the chat box. So if you go onto the right-hand side of your screen and click on chat, you're able to type in any questions that you might have, and we'll be sure to cover them at the end of the session. If you have any trouble seeing your screen and seeing the slides that Linda is presenting, you can either double click right on the picture, or you can click on the bottom square on the right-hand side of your screen, and that'll make the presentation full screen mode. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Linda. She's going to be able to share her screen. And again, we'll collect any questions that you have into the chat box and answer them at the end of the session. All right, Linda, take it away.
Thank you so much, Christine, and thank you to the New Jersey Highlands Coalition for inviting me to present, and I'm glad you're all here. I was thrilled at the prospect of presenting because I absolutely love Lake Champlain, and I'm passionately devoted to protecting her water quality. I have been swimming on and boating on and living by and walking along the shores of Lake Champlain for over 65 years. And I have actually witnessed the decline in water quality over that time. And it's been heartbreaking. So that actually provided a catalyst for a career change for me. And I went from working in mental health, helping people with their relationships with each other, to working with people on their relationships to water, specifically to Lake Champlain and other lakes and ponds in Vermont. And that relationship that I talk about in terms of relationship to the lake, it could be anything from their job to where they live, to the fact that they get their drinking water out of the lake, to something they like to do for recreation. It's also related to people's relationship to the lake in terms of their more sort of emotional connection. And I'm sure you can identify with this. People's relationships to water have to do with tradition, or have to do with restoration of their soul, or inspiration, or healing, or joy. So the relationship that we have to water is just so important, and protecting that water quality is key. And for me, it's about education around habits and behaviors and land use. So let's start with just the agenda. I'm going to introduce Lake Champlain Sea Grant. I'm going to talk a bit about Lake Champlain and its water quality issues. We'll talk about the link between water quality and Vermont's economy. And then we'll tackle the big subject of what is Vermont doing to improve Lake Champlain's water quality. As Christine said, we'll have a Q&A, and I will have a resource document for her to distribute to you after the presentation. So what is Lake Champlain Sea Grant? We are a cooperative program of University of Vermont Extension School and SUNY Plattsburgh. As it says here from the mission statement, we develop and share science-based knowledge to benefit the environment and the economies of Lake Champlain Basin, because we really recognize that a healthy economy is really dependent on a healthy environment. These are some of the many stressors in the basin that we address in our programming and in our community outreach and in our research: harmful algal blooms, stormwater runoff, flooding, microplastics, and many more. What you may not know is that there are sea grant programs across the United States, all university-based, all funded by NOAA. You have one here in in New Jersey. It's called the New Jersey Sea Grant Consortium. And I just picked a couple of other photos from websites, one from Wisconsin and one from California. And all of them do programs that are specific to the environmental and water quality issues of their area. So let's start talking about Lake Champlain. Lake Champlain flows for 120 miles north from southern part in New York up through the Richelieu River and out into the St. Lawrence and out into the ocean through Canada. And the name for Lake Champlain comes from Samuel de Champlain, who explored it back in 1600. But we are very certain and careful to honor the peoples that have been there for over 13,000 years. The Abenaki Nation has been very present on the Vermont side, and their name for Lake Champlain is Pitabaug, or the waters between. The Mohawk Nation, prevalent on the New York side, their name for the lake means Bulge Lake, but unfortunately I'm not able to pronounce that. Lake Champlain itself lies within a very large basin, 8,000 plus square miles, and the basin is essentially all the area around the lake from which water runs, from their rivers and the streams. So all of the water running from this basin only flows into the lake. It doesn't flow away from that area. Population of 600,000 provides drinking water for 270,000. Just as a comparison, I thought you might be interested to know the New Jersey Highlands cluster region where you are is 690 square miles, so a lot smaller, but you provide drinking water for 5.4 million people. Quite a bit of difference. One of the reasons that I put the square miles of the lake up here is to show you a very important comparison. So the basin is 8,000 plus. The lake is only 435 square miles. That means there's a very high land to lake ratio. And what that means is that there's a whole lot of water flowing off a very big area of land into a relatively small container. And therein lies some of our water quality challenges. That plus the only outlet in Lake Champlain is the Richelieu River, this really thin or kind of pencil thin river flowing north. And that means there's not a lot of possibility for turnover. So I wanted to give you a little picture essay on the lake. These are personally my favorite swimming spots. I've been swimming in the one over to the left for my entire life. That's looking out onto the Adirondacks. The one on the right is in a beautiful park right near where I live in Burlington. Lake Champlain is also a bustling tourist area and an area for a lot of visitors, local and out of state. That's the waterfront in Burlington, Vermont, and that is the bike path, which stretches from below Burlington all the way up to the Northern Islands. Lots of different recreational activities on the lake. I'm sure these are all common down in New Jersey too. That scene at the bottom is one of the islands up in the northern part of the lake. It almost could be the ocean, except for the rivers. So what I want to talk about in terms of lake water quality today is I want to focus on harmful algal blooms. There are several other factors to impaired water in Lake Champlain besides harmful algal blooms. We just don't have time to cover them all. They have to do with sediment. They have to do with E. coli from combined stormwater overflows and several other types of pollution. But harmful algal blooms are basically what's in the news these days because they are having quite an impact on the lake and on our economy. I picked this picture from the Lake Champlain Committee because it gives you a really good sense of all the different ways in which a harmful algal bloom or a bloom can show up. As you can see, like pea soup or sort of like gasoline was poured on the water, and someone said a can of paint. So a lot of different ways. Harmful algal blooms are really cyanobacteria blooms. And cyanobacteria is a bacteria that's been around for thousands and thousands of years, or millions, I meant. And some people say it's the original bacteria on Earth. regardless, it in and of itself is not toxic, but when the cyanobacteria gathers into a bloom, and I'll tell you in a minute what the conditions are, it can, when it breaks down and dies, it can actually exude a toxin. And not all cyanobacteria is toxic. It's just some cyanobacteria. And that's why it's very hard to judge whether a bloom is toxic or not. And we do not have the time to test it. We don't have, a minute test. So that's why we just say, stay out of any water that has a bloom in it. There may be toxins in it. So the conditions that support a harmful algal bloom are shallow water, still water, and warm air. And unfortunately, with climate change, our water is getting warmer in Lake Champlain, as I'm sure it is down where you are. Our air is getting warmer, more conditions for harmful algal blooms. They usually occur on shore, which is partly why they have such an impact on recreation and on tourism, because that's where people are. There's a lot of boaters, but the majority of people are on the shore. And so and they see them and they can't go in the water. Unfortunately, we're having them earlier in the year and into later in the year. In fact, the Lake Champlain Committee, which does monitoring, reported on blooms as recently as 2 weeks ago, which is quite late in the season. In terms of other contributing factors, there is the fact that we, including New Jersey, are in an area with the highest increase in heavy precipitation in the country. And that means that we in this area are getting the highest number of stormwater events, whether it's rain or snow, and in a lot of rain in a very short period of time. And so that obviously increases more stormwater carrying the nutrients for the cyanobacteria. It also causes flooding, which causes much more river and stream bank erosion, which carries a lot of sediment with the nutrients. Speaking of the nutrients, what feeds cyanobacteria is mostly phosphorus and nitrogen, and there's some complicated ratios with the nitrogen and phosphorus. And what we're focusing on in Vermont is the phosphorus. And phosphorus feeds the cyanobacteria, and the more phosphorus in the water, both from stormwater runoff, but also from what's already in the bottom, that's what's causing the increase in the algal blooms. So sources of phosphorus in Lake Champlain come, as you can see, Vermont tops it at 69%. We have more developed land along the shore, and we have more agriculture. And within the Lake Champlain Basin itself, the phosphorus sources are agriculture, developed land, forest land, stream bank erosion, that's what I mentioned, some from wastewater treatment plants, and a little teeny bit from wetlands. What I want to point out here is that acre for acre, more phosphorus flows off of developed land's impervious surface than flows off an acre of agriculture land. It's very important to know that's why we target developed lands in Vermont just as heavily as we target agriculture. It's just that we have so much agriculture acreage in the state. So harmful algal blooms, again, this is just a very small amount of information. There's a lot more out there, but in terms of effect on aquatic life, it blocks sunlight, depletes oxygen levels because the cyanobacteria is actually using the oxygen. Die-offs can occur of fish either from the depleted oxygen level or from the bloom, the toxicity itself. The cyanobacteria can clog fish gills. And on the human and dog side, and also with aquatic animals, there's skin irritations, which I can attest to. I don't swim in a bloom, but I swim when there's diffuse cyanobacteria. It looks like pollen, and my skin does feel itchy, so I take a shower. Stomach and liver and respiratory problems and neurological effects, including ALS. They're beginning to show correlation between harmful algal bloom proximity and ALS, or Lou Gehrig's disease. So harmful algal blooms, as I said, are increasing in frequency. Beach closures, these are really interesting statistics. In 2010, we only had one. Fast forward to last year, we had 44 beach closures in Burlington. And that's a huge source of visitation and recreation. So that is having a big impact on us. I put up this picture of these Secchi discs. Secchi discs are used to measure water clarity, or turbidity as it's called. When I was growing up and when I was swimming, I could see 15, 20 feet down easily. And as I've gotten older, there are days when, unfortunately, it is as turbid as the slide way over to the right. Generally, I can say probably I can see 8 feet on a good day, but on a poor day, it could be as low as 1 foot. And it's not that way all over the lake, but it is in certain areas, again, depending on nutrient flow and depending on the depth of the water. So we're going to talk about how clean water does support Vermont's economy. Before we talk about that, I want to mention that economic factors are a really mixed bag in terms of water quality. For instance, when some of you think of Vermont, you might think of the red farmhouse and the silo and rolling farmlands. And that is part of our iconic image, right? It's part of our branding. And yet, as you saw on the pie chart, it's also farms are a major source of stormwater runoff and phosphorus. Another example might be development. It's wonderful for our economy to have and for our tax base and for our employment to have businesses and homes pop up along the lakeshore, but that also means more impervious surface and more runoff. So I just wanted to mention that. So as you can see here, tourism is a huge source of income for us, not just from visitors, but from vacation homeowners, supporting thousands of jobs. And within that, Lake Champlain generates 300 million. We include the 580 million because fishing derbies and fishing tournaments are a huge source of income for both the New York and the Vermont side of the lake. And the converse is poor water quality is impacting the economy. The study noted here, done in 2015, projected that improving water clarity by 1 meter could increase home values by a significant amount. And as I mentioned, more beach closures are happening. We're having boil water notices, and not just related to harmful algal blooms, but also to, and I know you have them in your region, combined sewage treatment plant overflows, where the water just gets too much E. coli in it. So there are many studies that are being done linking the economy and water quality. I'm only going to touch on a few. The 2015 study that was just shown on the slide before, there's a little bit more information from that. They are projecting, and they use computer modeling because it's very difficult to measure it in any other way that's more exact. But with computer modeling, they're predicting that a 1 meter decrease in water quality can result in 195 full-time jobs lost, which means a whole lot more jobs because, as you know, with tourism and recreation and that kind of thing, those jobs are part-time. So that really represents a lot more jobs. 12.6 reduction in expenditures and a total economic reduction of 16.8. And Maine, another state which is very dependent on income from their lake recreation and tourism, they have a study which shows that 15% of home value is dependent on water quality, which is a very clear correlation there. And a half a meter in the particular study they chose, only a half a meter decrease in water clarity resulted in a $1.6 million loss in total sales activity. And what I want to point out here is water clarity is what these studies are measuring as what determines value. And it's both monetary value, but it's also value in terms of the aesthetic value. So it's much more about how clear the water is than what is in the water that you can't necessarily see, unless, of course, it's something like E. coli. Another study was done through the, Minnesota Sea Grant, that's right. And they looked at an opposite sort of influence of water clarity. And that is, they determined, and this was through a study, not through computer modeling, that people were willing to spend more money and drive farther to go to lakes with clearer water. So clearly, the water clarity is what's important. And then one more study, I'll quote, a UVM study suggested that home values could decline by 30% for homes that were along shoreline where there were frequent algal blooms. Unfortunately, this is all getting played out in real life. There's a town north of Burlington where the town assessor lowered the valuation of 37 homes by $50,000 per home due to the impact that water quality issues were having on the town. And that, of course, took almost $2 million out of the town budget. So it's definitely a real thing. So Christine's question, what is Vermont doing to clean up the lake? It's such a big topic, as I mentioned to her, but I will do my best to do it justice. Vermont enacted the Act 64, which is our Clean Water Act, back in 2015, addressing all the different sources of phosphorus and other nutrients polluting the waters in the state. And it is taking what's called an all-in approach, which is bringing all sectors of the state together to address all sources of, in this particular case, phosphorus runoff. Also, the next year, the EPA came in and ordered the state to change its levels of phosphorus loading in the lake. It's called TMDL, total maximum daily loading of the lake. And they made them a lot more strict, especially for certain areas in Lake Champlain that are truly in bad shape. And so that being able to meet the EPA requirements is going to take millions and millions of dollars and take many years. And that's why we need to do the all-in approach to the state. There are so many levels of departments and agencies in the state that I can't really do it justice in terms of what each of them are doing. All I can say is that each division within each agency is targeting a lot of their activity towards clean water. This is just one example, the Clean Water Initiative, and I chose this slide from the Clean Water Initiative website, which is part of Act 64, because it just gives you such a great overview of all the different ways in which the state is trying to clean up the water. So the state is a source for grants for clean water projects. It's a source for consulting on projects. It's a source for consulting to municipal cities and boards to help them come up with their master planning guidelines. The state is very strong in promoting green stormwater infrastructure. There's a clean water board that meets to decide with public input how we want them to spend the funds that we have, both from the funding source for the Clean Water Act and also from the Recovery Act, on clean water projects. So it's just a very comprehensive approach to clean water in Vermont, particularly on Lake Champlain. So I chose one state program to highlight today, and that is agriculture. They have had best management practices in agriculture for many, many years. They now have changed them to required agricultural practices, and these apply to all types of farms, big, medium, and small. And they focus on all the sources of phosphorus flowing off of farmland: sediment and nutrients, manure and waste storage, cropland erosion, poor soil health, and non-vegetative buffers. And so they are implementing green stormwater infrastructure solutions on a lot of these issues on farmlands. And one of the most important, well, they're all very important, but one of the ones I want to bring your attention to is the vegetative buffer zones. The farmers traditionally would farm right up to the river's edge, and that just left that all that open space for all that stormwater to flow right into the river, but also for significant stream bank erosion, not to mention the cows that got to walk in the river or stream and do their business. So planting trees and native vegetation along the streams and rivers is critical part of the required agricultural practices. And that I picked because, one, it's a very famous view of Lake Champlain, but two, it gives you a great idea of how the proximity of farmland to the lake, and therefore what a challenge it is to deal with runoff from agriculture property. So I mentioned green stormwater infrastructure. Christine asked me to talk about it in terms of Vermont. You all probably know this. I'll just do a real quick review. Gray stormwater infrastructure is stormwater infrastructure that handles water coming off of impervious surfaces and running right into our drains, through our culverts, through the pipes under our street, and right into our water bodies untreated. Green stormwater infrastructure is basically fashioned on what nature does, using all types of vegetation and soil and landscaping to deal with the stormwater. And the principles are, as you all know, slow it down, spread that stormwater out, sink it in, and filter it. That's the other important feature of GSI that doesn't always get mentioned. So we have hundreds, maybe thousands of GSI installations throughout Vermont. I just picked pictures of a few. There in the bottom is our green roof at the University of Vermont. That's on top of one of our parking lots. Over on the right is that riparian forest buffer that I was talking about that's so important, planting trees along all of our river and stream banks. Rain gardens, I know that you are doing a lot of rain garden installation. Christine was just telling me about a big project that she was doing earlier today. Bioretention basins, several other designs. What I want to do is also focus on another way in which the state is reaching people about green stormwater, in addition to funding and consulting and specific projects. And that is through manuals and guides and other printed materials. So this is available online as well as in print form. It will also be available as a link in a resource sheet that I give to Christine to distribute to you all. Vermont Guide to Stormwater Management. It's for homeowners and small businesses. It's a very comprehensive guide with lots of different choices around GSI. I picked the page to the right as a sample of what's in the booklet because I thought it was such a great idea that they actually rated each of the different GSI designs according to cost, installation, and maintenance, so that people who are using this guide can get a sense of the scope of the project that they're getting into. Another publication from the state I thought was very creative, and actually Sea Grant collaborated with the state on this, is the Green Stormwater Infrastructure Bicycle Tour. And that's literally what it is. We have 3 cities in the state, or actually in the Lake Champlain Basin, who have a significant amount of GSI installations that we mapped out. And so people can hop on their bikes or walk along with the map in hand. They can go to these different GSI installations. There will be a placard there telling you what was there before, what the stormwater runoff problem was, what type of design was installed, and what are the benefits resulting from it. We even recorded an audio version so people can walk around with their earbuds. Now I want to move from a state level to a municipal level, and I chose South Burlington because it has a lot of lake frontage, and it also has 2 very impaired streams running right through it, right into Lake Champlain. And they have their own stormwater utility, so they operate independent of the state, and they are very, very progressive and proactive on GSI. It's just wonderful. So just 2 examples, the bioretention area on the left behind one of their big apartment buildings, and on the right, they completely redid and installed a new road into a new downtown area and put those beautiful rain garden bump outs all along the edge. They are actually studying how much phosphorus and other nutrients and bacteria are being absorbed and filtered in their GSI installations, and they are showing that they are not only meeting, but they are surpassing Vermont standards in a lot of their installations. So that's just great news. Here's another publication that the state did in collaboration with some Designers and Engineers and the Lake Champlain Basin Program, another very important water quality organization. And this is the Green Streets Guide, and it's available for any municipality who wants to plan and build green infrastructure on their city streets. And this is one of the streets in Burlington. So one of my favorite groups, or one of my favorite types of programs that works on water quality are watershed groups. And I know that you all are a compilation of many, many, many watershed groups working together to address stormwater and water quality issues in your region. We have many in Vermont as well. They all work fairly closely together. And we have something called the Watershed United of Vermont that gets together on a regular basis to share ideas and resources and projects with each other. So I only picked two. One is the Friends of the Winooski River. The Winooski is one of our major river tributaries flowing right into Lake Champlain. And they actually restored a floodplain next to the river. This used to be a fully developed area with lots of impervious surface. And you can't see a lot of the GSI that's underground, but they planted this beautiful park, lots of trees, lots of native vegetation, great pollinator habitat. And they also did what I mentioned before. They did a lot of very important stream bank restoration. They've planted a lot of trees, a lot of native vegetation. And they actually did measure, after a very significant flood event 2 years ago, they measured how much sediment was deposited on this floodplain and how much phosphorus was within that sediment. 300 tons of sediment were deposited on this restored floodplain during one flood event, and within that 300 pounds of sediment. So all of that sediment, all of that phosphorus would have flowed right into Lake Champlain before this was restored. Another one of my favorite watershed organizations is the Lewis Creek Association. I worked with them before I worked with Sea Grant on this project called Ahead of the Storm. What we wanted to do was identify high stormwater runoff areas. These towns are all either right on Lake Champlain or on tributaries that are impaired. And we wanted to identify high stormwater runoff areas, and we wanted to create demonstration sites. So far we have 15 to date. Some of them are municipal sites and a lot of them are private homes, a couple of schools. And we went in with engineer and designers and created GSI solutions for the stormwater runoff. And then we would put our signs up there, as you can see, and people can actually get guided tours of each of these sites to learn what the runoff issues were, what the stormwater issues were, what type of installation was put in. And then they can have volunteers and staff from the Lewis Creek Association go to their homes and assess what the stormwater problems are on their property, help connect them with the designers and the contractors and the installers, and actually help them get funding. So it's been a real great success. My favorite project in the Ahead of the Storm is this one at the Shelburne School. This used to be all pavement, just a huge parking area. And the kids and the teachers worked with the Head of the Storm staff and designers and engineers to come up with this idea for how to reduce stormwater runoff from the school property into an impaired stream, which was flowing right into Lake Champlain. And what's wonderful about this project is the kids, the teachers, the staff at the school, the parents, many community members joined with the Ahead of the Storm volunteers and with all the professional people to put this in. And a lot of not only was the labor volunteer, but a lot of the materials were donated as well. So rain gardens are a big part of GSI, and another one of the publications that we've worked with the state and other watershed groups on is a revised rain garden manual for Vermont. This too, like all of our other publications, is available online, as well as will be in the resource sheet that we distribute. And it's a beautifully illustrated guide on everything from assessing your property, what types of plants, what types of soil you might have, what climate zone you're in, certain types of designs, where to get certain types of materials. And it's a very, very popular manual that is being distributed widely. One of the things that I like to highlight about rain gardens is why native plants are so important in all GSI, but particularly in this case in rain gardens. And I use this slide just to show, for those of you who weren't aware, that the reason is because the roots in native plants are so much longer than non-native plants. They can be 5, 6, 8 feet long, if not more. And the advantage to that is obviously not only that they're reaching water deeper in the soil for during drought time, but they are holding the soil together more, reducing erosion and creating all that great surface area for all those microorganisms which create the healthier soil. Look at the difference between native roots and non-native plants. Those beautiful plants that we ship in from all over that really don't belong in our area. And then look way over on the left at the lawn grass. Look at those roots. The roots for lawn grass are literally about as long as the grass blade itself. So that's why we are always encouraging people to plant native plants, to create no mow zones in their yards because of all the benefits. But speaking of lawns, we do believe that lawns can be their own GSI design. We have developed with several other organizations the program called Lawn to Lake. And what we are campaigning on is asking people to raise the blade on their lawnmower to 3 inches, leave the clippings on their lawn, and cut only a little bit of the grass blade height at each mowing. Because believe it or not, the longer the grass, as I said, the longer the root, and the longer the root, it's going to be more resilient during drought. We're unfortunately having more of that. It's also going to hold the soil more. It's going to create more airspace in the soil, leaving the clippings on the lawn decompose into your free natural fertilizer, all those great nutrients. And when they decompose, they become really rich organic matter, and soil that has a lot of organic matter in it acts like a sponge, and it just soaks up the rainwater, and as importantly, it filters it. And cutting only 1/3 of the grass blade height, that's kind of general, but what they're saying is don't let your grass grow pretty tall and then cut it very, very short, because that really stresses the grass and it puts all its photosynthesis energy into growing a new blade rather than into the root. Plus, the smaller bits of grass will decompose a lot more quickly. This is all in comparison to those lawns that are cut, I say, like a crew cut with really, really short grass. That means they have very short roots and their soil is extremely compact. And that means that stormwater runs off of that super hard compact soil almost the way it does off of impervious surface. So our campaign, we are promoting it to businesses, municipalities, and private homeowners. The business part of it is really fun. This is the Lake Champlain Chocolates business along Pine Street near where I live. And if the business says they will follow our practices, we make them these signs with their logos on it. They will post the sign on their property. It's great visibility for the campaign. People walking or biking by or driving by see the sign, go, long grass, long roots, clean water. And it gives them that idea. And then hopefully some of them will be walking into Lake Champlain Chocolates, and they will go to the counter and they will get a rack card. The business rack card is shown over to the left. It's got the logo of the business on it, and they can take the rack card home, find out what the campaign's all about and how they can also follow the practices. The rack card on the right is our educational rack card that we hand out to just the general public when we, given COVID, but when we can have public events. So another way in which we are getting the word out about water quality protection and land use is through various professionals and other people in the workforce. And the first example I'd like to give you is our accredited workshop for real estate professionals. We believe that at the time of people looking for houses or selling a house is an excellent time for them to learn about water quality, land use, and how they are related. And we believe that the realtors are sometimes the only, definitely often the first source of that information. It's just a great time to do that kind of education. So that is the reason that we're doing these. We're also doing it because the people on the state level, the people who are in charge of all the regulations, they were getting and they still are, unfortunately, but they were getting call after call from irate people who were either trying to buy a house or sell a house, saying things like, well, I didn't know that my septic, hadn't been permitted, or I didn't know that I couldn't put up a shed next to my house just because my house is on the lake, or I didn't know that I was in a floodplain. So that's why we really wanted to just address that issue as well, to reduce the number of violations that were going on, precisely because people just didn't know. So these are the topics that we offer, and I'm just going to quickly go through a few of them. One of them is on septic, basic septic design, basic septic maintenance, all the rules and regs about permitting, and very importantly, who to contact at the state for the information that they need. We also have a workshop on the Shoreline Protection Act. I could spend a whole hour just on the Shoreline Protection Act. It was enacted about, probably 8 years ago. And it was enacted because the shoreline along Lake Champlain and many of the other Vermont lakes was just degrading badly. People were stripping the shoreline and just putting up lawn or nothing. And it just was increasing the amount of not only stormwater runoff, but severe shoreline degradation. It was just eroding. So what the Shoreland Action did was set requirements for certain setbacks for what you can do on your lakeshore property. And what the Shoreline Protection Act people will do is they will go out to people's homes on the lake and assess things like this disaster here, where the land has been totally cleared, and give them lots of guidance as to what they can do using green stormwater infrastructure practices to bring it up to within the regulations of the Shoreline Protection Act. And I think that's just a beautiful after picture. So what the act is doing is saying, you cannot just totally clear all the trees and all the vegetation so you have this big open view and put nothing but lawn, which, as we just talked about, is often a source of runoff. You need to have certain amount of other types of vegetation, certain amount of trees to be able to comply with the Shoreline Protection Act. Two of the others, Vermont Wetlands Identification and Flood Hazards. Vermont, in its activity to address water quality issues in Lake Champlain and other lakes, has made much more rigorous its regulations for wetlands and for river corridors. So we teach the realtors all about what the new regulations are, how to identify whether a house is on or near a wetland, and what the standards are. And for river corridors, they learn things like, is this house that I'm trying to sell within a floodplain, even if it's not mapped on the FEMA maps, which is unfortunately often the case. So those are the realtor workshops. I also want to talk about another form of workforce development and training that we do in Vermont as a way to address water quality. And that is by addressing the workforce and educating them around environmental issues, around how they relate to the economy and water quality, we are going to be influencing the general public as well. NOAA is actually doing a whole workforce development initiative around environmental and water quality issues. So this is a picture of a postcard that we sent to 500 businesses in the Lake Champlain Basin who self-identified as saying the water quality in Lake Champlain directly impacts the viability and health of our business. So what we did was we created a series of 3-minute videos. They're all available, by the way, at my table at the expo. 3-minute videos about Lake Champlain, everything from the natural history to cyanobacteria blooms, raise the blades, water sampling, aquatic invasive species, lots of different information on the lake. And these videos are being shown to tourism-related business owners and their employees, because as you know, for tourists, they go places, they are going to pick up information from the owners and the employees of the establishment. We also develop these for all of the state parks in the state of Vermont. A lot of the state parks are on lakes. Several of them are on Lake Champlain. And so these videos are being shown to the park rangers and to all the employees and the volunteers within the park, so they can pass on this information to visitors. One more workshop or workforce development initiative. This is from the state, the Natural Shorelands Erosion Control Certification Program. And in this program, in one day, they get certified. They get certified in GSI for shoreland erosion. And these are beautiful before and after pictures here. In 3 years, they transformed that totally eroded roadside along a lake in northern Vermont to something fully vegetated and with no stormwater runoff or very little. And these landscapers and contractors and site workers who take this course also have their business put up on a website at the state level. So when people want to have natural shoreline erosion control installations, they know where to go. So I mentioned educating business. I just wanted to mention that I do a lot of presentations to Rotary clubs, to Chamber of Commerce, to various conferences, and to business associations. And through that, I get to direct a lot of people towards the watershed groups, because a lot of these organizations have volunteers that want to work on water quality issues. Another really creative way in which we reach the community and tourists and locals is by going where they are, literally. So this is a causeway that goes across from the mainland to the islands, and people bike it or walk it. So we went and we set up a sign. Those are a couple of Lake Champlain Sea Grant staff, and we stopped them. And we don't stop them, but they stop because they're curious. And I'm going to read the sign. It says, "No matter why you care about Lake Champlain, we want you to know more about it." And these staff people just tell the visitors all about the lake, and definitely about stewardship opportunities for how they can help clean up the water. I always like to mention museums as a really critical way to reach the public about stormwater and water quality and education and stewardship. This is the Echo Museum right in Burlington on the shore of the lake. I hope if you ever get to Burlington, you get to visit it. 160,000 people visit this museum every year, so that's a real captive audience. They have rotating exhibits, but all the exhibits are related towards how we as human beings impact water and what we can do to reduce that impact, and lots of science in between. They also have a van that goes from school to school and brings their education with them. And they also work collaboratively with organizations such as us, Sea Grant, to put on certain programs. And I think the last thing I have time for, I haven't been watching my time, but hopefully we're doing okay. I will touch on the Watershed Alliance program. And this is a school program that we distribute to both the New York side and the Vermont side of the lake. And we go into the schools. We've reached 5,000 students so far. We figure start at the beginning, right? To teach them water quality monitoring, studying plants and animals, understanding the water cycle and the impact of our land use practices on water quality. So they get to get their boots wet and their hands dirty, and they get out in the woods by the streams, and they bring samples back to their classroom and use their microscopes to study all the organisms that they brought back with them. And then sort of the grand finale is they get to go out on our research vessel out on the lake. And for many of the kids, it is the first time they've been out on the lake. And I just love the connection between the classroom and their microscopes and then getting out into the grand Lake Champlain, which is what it's all about. So there's so much more that I could talk about, but I think I want to wrap up now and say thank you for attending. Obviously, this is a passionate subject for me, and Vermont has its challenges, that's for sure. But like your area, we have lots and lots and lots of goodwill and lots of great ideas and expertise and some good funding. And I think we're going to be able to make a big difference. So let's open it up for questions.
Thank you so much, Linda. That was a great presentation. And it's so funny to see how similar your area is to our area where we're working as well. There's a couple of questions in the chat. The first one is, Could you speak about whether PFAS pollution is a problem in South Burlington?
It is in various areas around the state for sure. And so it's now a subject of a lot of city council meetings. I forgot to mention that for the Raise the Blade campaign, I'm going to be meeting with the Montpelier City Council to vote on it. And I noticed there was something on their agenda about it. So it's definitely, for whoever's asking the question may know it's a very serious problem down in southern Vermont, but it is beginning to show up around here too. I don't know much about it, but I could certainly get more information for them.
And I was wondering if you could speak about what do you think that municipalities should do to highlight the importance of clean water to the local economy? Because we have a lot of municipal officials that are attending this workshop. So what do you think that they should do to help highlight that connection between the importance of clean water and the economy?
It's a complex question. I think it has to do on so many, it could be addressed on so many different levels, but I think working with the city or the town on their regulations, on their permitting in terms of land use is super important. I was just noticing that there's a lot of controversy going on in South Burlington about development, and the municipal officials are struggling with how to incorporate development with water quality protection. So I think, as I've sort of made the point throughout my whole presentation, education is the key. So I think that having groups where, meetings where the public can come and actually learn more about the connection between water quality and the economy is important. I think connecting with businesses is a super important way to get the message out about it. I think it's just a constant balancing act between how do you manage your community in a way that allows for growth and yet to protect the water at the same time. So I'm not sure if I'm answering the question, but I think that education is the key in all the different avenues that they can get the word out.
Thank you.
And also working with we have a lot of conservation commissions. I don't know if you have them here, but the conservation commissions work very closely with the municipalities on development and on stormwater runoff mitigation. So whatever the watershed organization is in their area, to work very closely with them, in part because they collect the Lewis Creek Association, for instance, collects a lot of water data that the municipalities didn't have access to in any other way. So watershed groups are a source of a lot of important information and facts that municipalities can use. So I would encourage that as well.
Okay, great. If there are any final questions, you can just type them into the chat. But I want everyone to know that these slides and the resource list that Linda referenced will be posted online and shared with all of you. You can visit the conference website at northwestnewjerseyrivers.org, and all of that information will be posted after the conference. It doesn't look like there are any other questions. Oh, hold on. Wasn't Lake Champlain one of the Great Lakes for a time? LOL.
For 7 months. 7 months. That's where Patrick Leahy came in. Whoever asked that question may know the background. When we went to our conference for the Great Lakes region, they would say, what would they call it? I think they would call us a pretty good lake because all the other Great Lakes Sea Grants were a little bit miffed when we got our designation for that brief period of time. But I think it was a blessing because then we got the Sea Grant program, and it's such a fantastic program.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for presenting today. Like I said, all of this information will be shared after the conference is complete. And with today's session closing, you can go over to the Expo tab to learn more about what organizations are doing throughout this region for water quality and learn more about their organizations. or you can visit the networking tab where you'll be matched randomly with another attendee of the conference. So you'll be able to learn more about who is attending. And also tomorrow morning, please join us for day 2 of the conference. It starts at 9 a.m. Thank you so much.
Thank you.